is saying, if you put your screen on now, you're actually committing yourself to being visible. So Niko, a warm welcome from Researcher's Desk. I'm going to hand over to you now and as always with a Researcher's Desk talk, you can, we'll take questions at the end. You can write them down in the chat as we go along. I won't be reading them out until after the talk. And then of course we can raise our hands and so on to ask questions. Niko, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you also, Janine. And so I'm very happy to be here. And I know that many of you are from the climate justice movement. And I will show a German perspective, And I've chosen the title that Alistair wrote in the announcement, Why Academics Engage in Peaceful Civil Disobedience. And here you see an example where people from Scientist Rebellion are blocking a road in Berlin this year in July. And on the far left side is Janine O'Keefe from Sweden, and on the far right side am I, and we are glued to we were glued to the street. I'm a member of, or I'm going to actions together with Scientist Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion. And we are part of the climate justice movement, like Fridays for Future and other groups. And so I will begin with what I think is climate justice. This is justice between generations. And on the right, you see the when 2019, when Chancellor Angela Merkel and the at that time Vice Chancellor Olaf Scholz presented the Klimaschutzprogramm, presented a package of laws for climate protection, and everybody was completely disappointed by this program. It was a joke, and soon after this, I was for the first time in an illegal action. And so our lifestyle, our present day lifestyle and our former lifestyle and our refusal to take measures against the climate crisis aggravates the problem to our children. So this is the climate justice problem between the generations. And then what is equally important is the climate justice between regions, because the drivers and the victims of global warming, the drivers of global warming are the rich countries, and the victims of global warming are the poor countries in the global south. On the left, you see the map of vulnerability for 2019. Vulnerability is the sum of exposure, sensitivity, and ability to adapt to the negative impacts of climate change. And you see that the most vulnerable countries are in Southern Asia and in Africa, and also in South and Southeast Asia, and also in South America. And the least vulnerable countries are in the global north, and these are the rich countries, mainly because they have the money to adapt to the negative impacts of climate change so far. and also they are not as exposed as the global south. And this map is almost a negative of the territorial CO2 emissions, which you see on the right side. So these are the blue are the countries that don't emit much CO2, and red are the countries that emit a lot of CO2. And there's something like an axis of evil in terms of emissions from North America over Saudi Arabia, Russia to Australia. These are the least affected countries are the worst emitters, and the most affected countries are the emitting only little. And so, and when I give talks about a climate crisis, I barely talk about the future. So I think it is really irrelevant what the projections for 2100 are. I mostly show what is going on right now, because we are in the middle of the crisis. For example, for Pakistan in March, April 2022, there was this heat wave, long and very early in the year, up to almost 50 degrees. And these heat waves have become 30 times more likely through global warming. And then in the summer, in the monsoon, they had this incredible floods in Pakistan. 33 million people lost their homes or were displaced from their homes. 1,500 were killed. And this is again related to climate change. This is a statement from the World Weather Attribution Initiative that these extreme rainfall events have become more probable through global warming. And it was not only the extreme rainfall, but it was also the melting glaciers in the Karakoram. And then on the other hand, we look at the emissions. Pakistan emits 1 ton of CO2 per capita, per person, and Germany emits almost 8 tons of CO2 per person. So greenhouse gas emissions of the rich countries cause death and destruction in the global south already now, and to an increasing amount also in the rich countries, as we know from, for example, the Western US drought or the flood last year in Germany. So, but the problem is it's not only the climate crisis. This is the real bad thing. It's not only the climate crisis. It is also the larger, the wider ecological crisis. This is a very important, interesting paper from Wiedmann and others from 2020, and it shows the development from 1970 to 2020 or 2018 of the gross domestic product. This is the yellow or this orange line. The growth of the gross domestic product of the world, so economic growth. And then the green line is the CO2 emissions. And the blue line is raw material extraction. And we see that the CO2 emissions, it is probably possible to decouple CO2 emissions from economic growth, from the growth of the GDP. This is probably possible, although in no way fast enough to go to net zero in the necessary time. It's not fast enough, but the blue line really goes parallel to the orange line, and there's no evidence that raw material extraction can be decoupled from gross domestic from economic growth. The economic growth and the raw material extraction growth. This is what the energy transition means for copper, for example. Just an example. Energy transition to drive. The energy transition is to drive doubling of copper demand by 2035. 2035. And this is totally new from 2022. And as a result, we need an unprecedented amount of new mine openings. And these mines, they destroy ecosystems. On the lower left, you see copper mine destroying forests in Panama's biodiversity corridor. So it won't be possible. It won't be possible. And in order to prevent climate and biodiversity collapse, we need degrowth. And degrowth is the planned reduction of socially less necessary production, like SUVs or flying with rockets to the space, or ever bigger households. We need the reduction of socially less necessary production in rich countries. Degrowth is not for Pakistan, this is for us. This is an incredibly difficult task, of course. But it's much more difficult than only the climate crisis. So this is Guterres. We have a choice: collective action or collective suicide. It is in our hands. But the question is, what action should we take? And one thing that scientists have done, and which is also very, very important, is informing the public about the crisis, about the climate and ecological crisis. But this has been futile in the last 40 years. And here is on the left side is Heumar von Ditford. He was a science journalist in television at the time when we had only 2 television channels in Germany, and he was incredibly popular. And you can watch this on YouTube. It's from 1978, and he shows the Keeling curve, which was only 20 years long at the time. And he was telling, when we go on like this, we will have droughts and extreme rainfall in Germany. And so, and he was really charismatic and empathic and everything. And this is more than 40 years ago. And on the right side, this is me in 2018 when I started to give these lectures. And this is almost ridiculous. I show the same curve, and this curve the Keeling curve has even steepened in the time. And I try to explain the same things. And the problem is that climate communication is counteracted by various forms of climate denial, as you all know. And there is something in our rich countries, there's something like a feedback loop of climate denial, because the majority of normal people in our countries just want to live on like always. This is natural. They want to continue their style of life. And on the other hand, the politicians want to be elected. Therefore, the politicians refuse to communicate the truth about the climate crisis. Scientists communicate this, and Guterres communicates it, but you will never see our chancellor saying something like delay means death. Never. And because the politicians don't tell the truth, the normal people continue to underestimate the climate crisis. They think it's something about 2100 and something about future generations, and that is not interesting. Therefore, because they underestimated the crisis, they go on voting for politicians who promise stability and ever increasing wealth. And this is what all our parties do. They all promise that we will become more and more wealthy. And this is, how can this loop be broken? And then the other thing is climate conferences or scientific publications. If you are a climate scientist, climate conferences, IPCC reports. And this is a curve that shows the increase of the global emissions of CO2 and CO2 plus CO2 equivalents from other gases. And from 1850 to 2018, it's increasing. And then you see the climate agreements and the the IPCC reports. And the first IPCC report is from 1990. And so this international climate policy was highly unsuccessful in the past. And also here, it is unrealistic to assume that this will change fast enough. So the international climate politics and the reports and the climate conferences, they will not do the job. I don't go to these climate conferences. First, because I don't fly, and second, because I think they are insignificant. And so what some respected climate scientists do is they hope for a miracle. Like our climate scientist Mojib Latif, he's one of the famous persons in Germany. He makes these talks about climate crisis and insufficient political activity, and then at the end people ask him, why do you still have hope? And then he says, yeah, maybe something unforeseen will happen, like the German reunification. Nobody expected this. So he really hopes for a miracle, and I think this is not enough. So therefore, peaceful civil disobedience. And Christiana Figueres, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, the mother of the Paris Agreement, she said in 2019, it is time to participate in non-violent political movements wherever possible. And she said, civil disobedience is not only a moral choice, it is also the most powerful way of shaping world politics. And this is true, because we have historical examples that were successful, like the American civil rights movement with Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and others. They have been successful. They ended the right discrimination, the black people discrimination, or at least from the legal side. There is still discrimination, but there are no laws for discrimination anymore. And or Gandhi and his movement, who drove the Brits out of India, or the suffragettes who were successful to for the women's right to vote. And all these movements, they were defamed by their contemporaries. At their time, they were called terrorists and idiots and I don't know what. But they always afterwards they are glorified. Now these people are glorified. And now the climate justice movement, people tell us, you are no really civil disobedience movement. Martin Luther King and Gandhi, these were the good guys, but you are basically idiots. So we are also defamed by our contemporaries, and this makes me hope that we will be glorified by posteriority. So this is actually, at the moment in Germany, we have the last generation, very successful movement, doing different kinds of actions like blocking roads and turning off oil pipelines and so on. Now, why should a scientist take part? Shouldn't we stay at the site and make information and climate conferencing and everything? Why should the scientist take part? And I think for me, the main reasons are by taking part in these actions, we show that these activists are not just stupid children, because most people think that they are stupid children. And if we go as researchers or scientists, we show that these are not only stupid children, but also more or less intelligent and not so young people. And we attract more public attention. Like it's something special when scientists leave the lecture hall and sit on the road. And I think we lose credibility if we don't take part, because, so therefore I have written there, civilization will probably collapse. Can I have another cup of tea? So I cannot talk about the end of civilization and go on like always. I cannot talk about doom and destruction and then have another cup of tea. So this is not credible. And here's as a scientist, you get more public attention. For example, here I was on the right. I was removed from the road in Frankfurt, and this made it to Bild. Bild is the biggest newspaper in Germany. It's the Bild online, so it was not in the paper, but in the online version, which is read by many people. Or on the lower left, I sat on a road in Bonn, in my hometown, and there was a big article, or reasonably big article, in the main newspaper in Bonn, and it was in this. Once a week they have a page on science and university, and they put this on the page for science and university. And it says that I think that civil disobedience is unavoidable for mitigating the climate crisis. And so this is quite some statement. And I was thinking that maybe the university director would call me and say, come on, this is a bit too much. But I had no negative feedback. I had some positive feedbacks from colleagues. So it brings more public attention. So now the reasons not to take part: it is time consuming. It costs a lot of time. I've come back this morning. I've come back from Berlin at half past midnight. I've come back from Berlin. So from actions from the Extinction Rebellion wave. So it takes away a lot of time. And it's true, I'm not publishing very much anymore. So yeah, my scientific output has diminished. And it is expensive. Of course, it costs some money to travel to Berlin and also to pay some fees for the police. It may be painful, as you can see here. This are the pain grips that the police applies, but only if you tell them you won't go with them. So they ask you, do you want to come with us, or do we have to apply force, and then I say force, please, and then they use these pain grips. And next is, it is against the law. This is very clear. But the courts are more and more on our side. This is an action that we had last summer last spring. In Düsseldorf, we occupied the parliament. And this is a lot of bad things that you should not do. And I was this guy in blue on the right. I was chained inside a windmill that we brought with us, and it took the police 4 hours to get us out of this thing. But I was not at all. I have this. I was not at all sued, and the people on this roof here, the people on the roof, they went to court, and this girl on the left that was on the roof, she was sentenced, and she was sentenced to do social work. And what they told her to do is she has to speak to school classes and discuss with school classes about climate crisis. So this is the sentence. So this means that the courts are basically on our side. So much about law. So now I'm through with my 20 minutes. So, and I think there will be a lot of discussion necessary. So, and if you are interested to join Scientist Rebellion, send an email to Janine under this address, janineclimate@gmail.com. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Niko, for a really clear and excellent talk. I'm going to stop recording now as we move into the discussion.